It's time now to get a deeper understanding of Darwin's great insight, the process of natural selection. It's this process, Darwin believes, that has the power to sculpt species, to change species, to equip them with adaptations, and in fact to multiply species over time. When Darwin returned from his 5-year voyage, his prior Christian views were shaken. No longer did he believe that species were fixed and unchanging. He now believed that species did in fact change. So he set himself the task of figuring out how could species change. And he hit upon a key idea. He realized that humans have the power to change species, which means that species are in fact changeable. And how did humans change species? Through a selection process. So Darwin tried to figure out how a selection process might be going on in nature without any kind of conscious mind or intelligence being involved at all. The case we'll look at in this lesson series is the case of the stick insect. You'll notice in these pictures here, the thin bodies of these insects and the coloration of the body provides excellent camouflage. So this would be an adaptation, and this was recognized by everybody, the Christians and naturalists like Darwin. The question, of course, was how did these insects get this great camouflage? Here's another example of a stick insect, a rather large one, lives in the forests of Southeast Asia. You can even see on the legs there are little thorns to mimic the little thorns on the sticks and branches in the environment. So the Christian view on the left here shows that the stick insects were always stick insects. God had designed this body shape for the purpose of camouflage. So God made the first stick insects, and then the insects reproduced and passed on that trait, but they had never changed over time. For Darwin, stick insects had a history. They were not always well camouflaged in an environment of sticks. So the ancestors were not stick insects. Indeed, the ancestors might have been a species that split into multiple species, only one of which evolved this body shape for camouflage. He called this process descent with modification, that species changed over time, and they evolve adaptations to suit their current environments. We're going to be using a bracket diagram like this. So this shows different generations over time, and we'll be looking at how useful traits increase over time and how an adaptation can be improved over time. So what we're trying to explain is how the stick insects got their excellent thin-bodied camouflage. Well, the first thing to consider then is the environment in which this process would have occurred. And of course, we'll say the environment had lots of sticks. Of course, the environment then also has predators. And a variety of animals might eat stick insects. We'll just focus on the birds here, for example. And we've learned in past lessons that the recipe for natural selection involves variation, selection, and heredity. If all three of these are present, then we're going to get evolution by natural selection. You've got to have variations in traits in a population, and those variations must be DNA-based variations. There's got to be some factor determining who's going to win and who's going to lose the struggle for existence. That's the selection factor. And then the winners of the struggle for existence are going to be the parents and pass on their winning traits to the next generation. If all three are present, you're going to get evolution by natural selection. And as this process happens in succeeding generations, adaptations can get better over time. Every generation there are new variations, and if selection is constantly occurring in every generation, then the adaptations can improve over time. All right, let's break down the process one generation at a time. The context is we're in an environment with sticks, and then we've got predators. And predators are going to be eating some individuals that they see and not eating the individuals that they don't see. So the stick environment is going to set the standard for the quality of camouflage. And the birds, being the selection factor, they're going to be determining who's going to be winning the struggle for existence. So here we have our first generation. So the parents have produced offspring, and we see some variation. Now, reproduction, Darwin understood, produces this variation. He didn't understand why it is that the offspring show variation each generation. He didn't understand about DNA, but he didn't have to appreciate the significance of variation. Now, we say the variation is random. It's due to DNA mutations, which are random, and also the random shuffling of genes during sexual reproduction, the production of sex cells. But again, Darwin didn't understand the source of the variation. But we say the variation is random in the following sense, in the sense that the variations occur without regard to the well-being of the offspring. It's not like the parents are looking around and realizing there's birds in the environment and they're in a stick environment, and so the parents are thinking, hey, listen, we need to have some babies that look more like sticks. No, they cannot steer the characteristics of their offspring. The variations we see here are random, outside the control of the parents' wishes or desires, if they had any. Now, given the variation of body shape, some offspring have an advantage over others. And indeed, in an environment with sticks, the thinner-bodied individual looks a little bit more like a stick compared to the other down here. So we would say that this individual up top here has an advantage, a survival advantage, better camouflage. The disadvantage goes to this one, worse camouflage. Now, the body shape variations are differences that make a difference to survival. Certainly, escaping detection from the predator really is an important event. Some individuals are going to get eaten, and some individuals will be overlooked. So the advantage to one individual is always relative to others in the population. You don't have to look perfectly like a stick if you just look a little bit more than somebody else in your environment. So we have here then unequal chances of survival. The variation in body shape in an environment with sticks means that not everybody has an equal chance. The ones with a little bit better camouflage will tend to survive a little bit better. Now you might say, why would looking 10% like a stick be really better than 2% like a stick? Well, under certain conditions, it really might make a difference if you look a little bit more like a stick. Under what conditions? Well, what if the predator is far away or moving? It just might be the case that if the predator is far away or moving fast, looking 10% like a stick is just that much little bit better camouflage than 2%. Or under conditions of low light, again, the 10% like a stick gives an advantage over 2% like a stick. So even the slightest advantage can be magnified over time. We're talking about huge numbers of individuals in a population, and we're talking about long periods of time with succeeding generations. The slightest advantage, that advantage will magnify over time. Now let's add some numbers to this example. Let's say we have 100 individuals, 100 offspring, and then we'll take a look at their survival outcomes. So let's say we have 10 individuals with the thinnest body, that's this 10 here, and 80 individuals with this body, that's the 80, and 10 individuals with this body shape, 10 there. Now the reason why the middle one, there's 80 of those individuals, is because most often, most offspring are going to resemble the parents. So the one in the middle is the one that looks like the parent, and it would be the most common trait in the population. But then we have the variation at the extremes here, both thinner body and thicker body. Now let's look at the survival outcomes. Well, if you have the thin body, 8 out of 10 survive, 80% survival rate. Only 2 of the thin ones were detected by the predators. In the case of the middle body shape here, 40 out of 80 survived, 50% survival rate. And with the thick body, only 2 out of 10 survived, or a 20% survival rate. So only 2 individuals with the thick body escaped detection. 8 of their fellow thick-bodied friends got eaten by the predators. So we can say then that the predators are responsible for the different survival outcomes. This is a cause and effect process. The activities of the birds is causing individuals with different body shapes to have different chances for survival. Darwin uses the word selection to refer to this kind of interaction. The predators are selecting offspring with better camouflage by eating the offspring with worse camouflage. So it's not the case that the predators see all of the different body variations in the environment and then just choose to eat the worse camouflaged ones and just choose to not eat the better camouflaged ones. No, it's that they just see the worst camouflaged insects more often than the better camouflaged ones. Notice that Darwin is using the concept of selection a bit differently than we normally do. If we go into the supermarket and we are selecting the food item we want, we select it and then take that one off the shelf and leave the others alone. So the one we're selecting is the one we're acting on. And that's not the case in this situation. The birds are acting on the worse camouflaged ones, but we're saying, Darwin would say, that the birds are selecting the better camouflaged individuals. So it's sort of like the reverse of our normal use of the word selection. That birds are selecting the best fit individuals by eliminating the worse fit individuals. Now, this selection process is non-random. Predators don't randomly eat insects. They eat the ones they see. So it's really important to understand that while the variation is random due to DNA mutations and gene mixing, the selection is not random. There are unequal chances of survival because the birds are just eating the ones they see, and it's not random which ones they see. They see the less camouflaged ones more than the well camouflaged ones. Now, the factor in the environment that is selecting winners and losers is called the selection pressure. So the predators would be the selection pressure. And because the selecting factor was in nature, this is why Darwin called this process natural selection. Notice it's not a conscious mind purposely selecting the thinner bodies. It's birds just trying to get a meal. Now, there might be other differences between individuals, but if they don't affect survival, they cannot be seen by natural selection. Natural selection operates on the differences that make a difference. At this stage, then, we're ready to move to the next generation. The surviving offspring get to reproduce. So the individuals that escape detection, they're the ones that are going to be the parents of the next generation. And the DNA-based advantage in camouflage is going to be passed on to the next generation offspring. And so here we see then the role of heredity. Heredity preserves the best fit traits. Notice it's these ones up here, the thinnest bodied ones, that are going to tend to be the ones to be parents. So we're drawing the line from this individual. These down here will get eaten more often. So they're going to have fewer offspring represented in the next generation. So it's always the best fit individual, the best camouflaged individual that will have the most offspring in the next generation. And that's why we get this kind of bracket effect here, where it's the top individual that tends to out-reproduce others. In fact, in these diagrams, we're only showing the best fit individuals are the ones having offspring to make the next generation. But in natural populations, it will be true that some of the middle individuals will have offspring. And in fact, even maybe some small fraction of the worst camouflage individuals get lucky and they reproduce. But we're only showing the best fit ones having offspring to emphasize the point that, relatively speaking, they are out-reproducing their competitors. Now, what is it that prevents the best fit individuals from mating with the worst fit individuals? Well, the worst fit individuals are dead. And this was a theoretical concern for Darwin, because if there is this variation, what's to prevent the thin-bodied ones from mating with the thick-bodied ones? And here's where Darwin had that insight. Oh, the thicker-bodied ones are going to be eaten more, so they're not going to be around. So this ensures that the traits of the next generation are not diluted by the worst traits of the previous generation. The average camouflage of the second generation is better than the previous generation. And we saw this effect in the human selection example. This is what selection does. It is changing the characteristics of future generations. Notice the new variation in the second generation due to DNA mutations. Again, we have an advantage to the thinnest bodied individuals. They have better camouflage, and a disadvantage to the thickest ones in that generation. So we have an unequal chance of survival. And again, we have predators selecting offspring with better camouflage by eating the offspring with worse camouflage. And again, heredity preserves the best fit traits, and the new variations improve the camouflage in later generations. So every generation, there are individuals that perish, leaving others to carry on the species. In time, most members of the population will have the stick-like body shape, and we would call that a species-wide adaptation. We say the population is evolving when useful traits increase in frequency over time. Now notice, it is populations that evolve. Individuals don't evolve. Individuals are born with their DNA-based traits. So evolution is a population phenomenon. Individuals are just born with their traits, but it's the population that evolves as the best fit traits increase in frequency over time. Notice the best fit traits each generation are the adaptations. So it's not like we only say the really thin-bodied one, that's an adaptation. We could say that even these individuals back in these previous generations, the body shape is an adaptation. It's just that there's still some room for improvement over time. So here we see selection has been operating over many generations, and we're now at this population here. We've got some individuals with really excellent camouflage. Their bodies look very much like a stick. Now at this point, natural selection does not stop with an excellent adaptation like this. It continues to penalize individuals with mutations that destroy the adaptation. So if we were to continue the bracket diagram, the next generation, maybe all the individuals look really thin. But selection doesn't stop, because even thin individuals are going to have offspring, some of which will have mutations that will make larger bodies, thicker bodies. And it's those individuals in each generation that will be weeded out by natural selection. So in this way then, selection tends to maintain the high quality traits by penalizing any mutations that deviate from that excellent adaptation. Notice that without variation, the population cannot evolve. Let's think about this for a second. If all the offspring are identical, if there's no variation, then there is nothing to select from. You've got to have differences for a selection process to be happening. Now, without variation, predators would still eat some individuals each generation, but no individual has an advantage based on a DNA difference. See, the fact that this one got eaten is not because it had a certain body shape, it just got unlucky, and the birds saw this one and not that one. So if you don't have variation, you can't have selection. And if you don't have selection, you won't get evolution. Notice also that without predators selecting winners and losers, body shape wouldn't matter. All body shapes could reproduce equally, hence no evolution towards thin bodies. So if there are no predators, then there's no factor that gives some individuals an advantage over others. Everybody gets to reproduce. It would look something like this. If everybody gets to reproduce, they're going to pass on their particular body shape to their offspring. You'll get no evolution. And notice that predators are not trying to cause the evolution of better camouflage in their prey. It's not like the birds have set upon themselves the project, let's make these bugs better camouflage. Let's turn them into stick insects. No, they're not trying to do that. They're just trying to eat. But it's the interaction of predators with this population that is causing the evolution of the stick insects. So notice that individuals don't have to have perfect adaptations each generation, just better than their competitors. So at each generation in the past, it's not like they really were looking like a stick, but the individuals that had the thinnest bodies, they had the relative advantage. So you don't have to be perfect each generation, just better than everybody else. Notice that without heredity, the best fit would have more offspring, but their offspring would not inherit the best fit trait. The population would not evolve. Again, we'd have a situation like this. So here's our generation. We have variation, and if there's still selection, so there's predators, so they're going to eat the thicker bugs, leaving the thin ones to reproduce. But if the trait is not heritable, then the thin-bodied one is going to have all kinds of variation in the body shapes in their offspring. So the second generation is going to look like the first because body shape is not heritable. So heredity is key to preserving the fit traits in the next generation. Now, some final points. There is no goal or end state to evolution. Whatever selection pressures are acting in the environment will cause the evolution of adaptations to deal with those pressures. So it's not like, in the grand scheme of things, the bugs were destined to evolve this stick-like shape. That's what happened in an environment of sticks with predators in the environment. That's what happened in this particular situation. Natural selection produces the illusion of design. This creature looks like it was designed by an intelligent mind. You'll recall the Christians had a two-step process in mind to explain adaptations like the stick body shape here. So God thinks of the purpose of the part, camouflage, and designs the structure to serve that purpose, thin body. God makes the stick insects with those parts. So the purpose first and the parts second. Well, Darwin comes along and reverses that. So notice the parts are happening first. Through the process of reproduction, we get individuals with variations in all kinds of parts. In this case, we're focusing on the body shape. So the part comes first, but then the purpose comes later as the individuals have to just use whatever parts they have, and the individuals with the thin bodies, turns out, they escape detection more often than the thicker bodied one. So the thin body comes to have a purpose, camouflage. The Christian thinkers didn't understand the history of failed experiments in the past generations. The Christian thinkers didn't understand how factors in the environment could select certain traits each generation and so change a species over time. And this then completes our deep dive into the process of natural selection. Stick insects today did not always look like sticks. The well-camouflaged bodies here are the result of an evolutionary process. Variation each generation, selection by predators, and the passing on of those winning traits, heredity, preserving those winning traits. That process has been going on for countless generations, and that's why today we see populations of insects with such excellent camouflage. So now here are 3 summary slides of some of the key points in this lesson. This is page 1. Page 2. And page 3. You can go back and pause on each and make sure you read all of the bullet points. That completes this lesson on Darwin's great insight on natural selection.